Hey everybody. So before we get to this video, I just want to talk about my live stream schedule a little bit. I will not be live streaming Game 2 between Washington and Vegas tonight. I don't have time to do it. So no live stream tonight. My next live stream will probably be Game 4 on Monday. That's looking like the next time that I'll be streaming during the game. So be sure to check that out Monday night. Game 4, I should be live streaming. I probably won't be able to do Game 5, but then 6 and 7, assuming the series goes that far, I'll be able to live stream during those. So the next one is looking like Game 4, so be sure to check that out. Now, on to this video. I figured we could look back on the regular season a little bit, since we're only one game into the final. Um, so this is a list of 10 players who had good seasons but played were on really bad teams. So and I didn't count teams as bad teams that only missed the playoffs by a little bit. So nobody from Florida or Dallas or Calgary um, are on this list. Carolina, teams like that are on this list. I picked from the bad teams, the teams like Vancouver, Arizona, Buffalo, the Islanders, teams like that are the guys that I picked for this list. And so here's 10 players who had good years but were stuck on very bad teams. And first up from the Vancouver Canucks is Brock Boeser. Um, Boeser got his season cut short because of injury, unfortunately, but when he was on the ice, he was very, very good. He played 62 games this year. He had 29 goals, 26 assists for 55 points, and he scored .89 points per game. So he was a really effective player when he was in the lineup, almost a 30 goal scorer. He clearly would have been a 30 goal scorer had he not suffered an injury towards the end of the season that kept him out for really the last like third of the year or quarter of the year. So he should be really, really good again next year, and hopefully he stays healthy. And he is a very big bright spot for the Vancouver Canucks. Next up, Mark Stone from the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa had a disastrous season this year. After going to the Eastern Conference Final last year, this year could not have gone worse for them. But Mark Stone had a very good year. Unfortunately, his season, much like Boeser's, also was cut short due to injury. He only played 58 games, and his numbers certainly would have been better had he played the full season. But in those 58 games, Stone scored 20 goals, 42 assists for 62 points, and a points per game of 1.07. So he was better than a point per game when he was in the lineup. It was just injuries that held him back this year. And 62 points is still not a bad year at all, especially only playing 58 games. Next up, Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin from the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit was never really in it this year. They're not a super bad team, but they're right in the middle of mediocrity there. They're not even really close to a playoff team, but they're not so bad that they're getting top five picks every year either. So Larkin had a decent year for them. He played all 82 games. He only scored 16 goals, which they want to see that number a lot higher. You definitely want to see Larkin in the 25 goal range, but he had 47 assists, so he became much more of a playmaker and setup man this year. Um, and he really racked up the assists. So for those two together, for a total of 63 points and a points per game of 0.77. So the Red Wings were not very good, but Larkin had a decent year, and especially with his assists, and his point total was still pretty darn good, and he led the team in points. Next up from the Buffalo Sabres, we have Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel, he had a good year when he was on the ice again this year. The problem was injuries again. That ankle injury seems to be a nagging problem for him, and he needs to get that figured out going forward, because he cannot be missing significant time every season. He's too important to the Sabres. Buffalo was the worst team in the league this year, but Eichel still put up some serious points and had a good offensive year. He played 67 games. In those 67 games, he had 25 goals, 39 assists for 64 points, and .96 points per game. So he wasn't quite a point per game player. Injuries played a role in that, and but he was close, and he had a decent year with 64 points, even though he missed time and was on such a bad team. So I look for him next year to be better than a point per game, and hopefully to play at least 75 games. And then we'll see his point totals up in the 80 plus area. Next, from Arizona, we have Clayton Keller. Arizona was the worst team in the West this past season, but Clayton Keller is certainly a bright spot for them and has a very bright future with the team. He played all 82 games this year. He scored 23 goals, 42 assists for 65 points, and a points per game of 0.79. So not quite a point per game player. Nobody was on Arizona that played any significant time. He led the team in points. He had a tremendous year for them, and he has a very bright future going forward. They just need to build around guys like him, and he needs to keep producing at this level and better as the team gets better. Next, we go to Edmonton with Leon Draisaitl. Edmonton was supposed to be really good this year. They made the playoffs last season. This year was a disaster for them, but their disaster was not because of Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid. Those two had fine years. It's really everybody else that let them down, especially on their defense. But Draisaitl, he played 78 games. He had 25 goals, 45 assists for 70 points, and was 0.9 points per game. Does Edmonton want more points from him? Absolutely, especially for the contract he just signed. Should he be a point per game player? Absolutely, especially the contract he just signed. But you need players around you to produce as well if you're going to put up numbers. And he had 45 assists on a team that did not get much goal scoring from anybody other than Draisaitl or McDavid. So, he had a fine year. 70 points is a little lower than what they would have hoped for. I think they looked for Draisaitl to be a 85 to 90 point guy, but he didn't get any help. So he was okay. He played fine. The rest of the team really dropped the ball this year, and that's why Edmonton was so bad. Next up, we have Patrick Kane from the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago was bad, really, really bad for the first time in probably a decade now, this past season. But Patrick Kane still had a good year production-wise. Not his best year by any stretch in the imagination, but it's not like he had much help with the Blackhawks. So in 82 games for Kane, he had 27 goals, 49 assists for 76 points. 76 points on a team like as bad as Chicago is a pretty darn good year. He had .93 points per game. He's shown he can easily be a better than a point per game player, but again, you need teammates to do that. And he didn't have much help this year. Chicago's defense was bad. Their goaltending situation was bad. They had really no depth up front. Jonathan Toews has dropped off tremendously. They have a few bright young players in Alex DeBrincat and Nick Schmaltz, but other than that, it's not looking good for Chicago. But Kane had a fine year. Next up, John Tavares, the New York Islanders. The offense was not the problem this year for the Islanders. It was goaltending and defense. Their goaltending is absolutely atrocious, and their defense is not much better. It is average at best. But up front, the Islanders were fine this season. They scored a ton of goals. They just could not keep the puck out of their own net. Tavares played all 82 games. He scored 37 goals, 47 assists for 84 points, and was 1.02 points per game. He's a free agent, and if I were him, I would not sign with the Islanders. I would go to a team that's going to be a contender if they sign him or is already a contender. But I would not go back to New York because in the almost a decade now that John Tavares has been a New York Islander, they have failed to put any sort of contending team together. They're an on and off playoff team at best, and the farthest they've ever gone is the second round of the playoffs. So if I'm Tavares, I am taking these numbers and going to a new home and trying to go somewhere where I can legitimately win a Stanley Cup, because it is not with the New York Islanders unless they drastically change their defense and goaltending situation. Another Islander up next, Matt Barzal. He should be the Rookie of the Year without a doubt in my mind. He had a tremendous season. Offense was not an issue for the Islanders. Defense and goaltending is the problem. Barzal had a tremendous rookie year. He played all 82 games. He had 22 goals, 63 assists for 85 points and 1.04 points per game. He was just absolutely fantastic. Those 63 assists are unbelievable. Just tremendous rookie year. He might be the one guy that can keep John Tavares with the Islanders, because the Islanders can go to Tavares and say, look at the future we have with Matt Barzal, and you two can be together for the next 10 years or whatever, and if we get a goaltender, the next thing you know, we're looking at to be a contending Stanley Cup team. So he is a tremendous bright spot for the Islanders. He is their future. We'll see if he is enough to keep Tavares around, or if Tavares goes to a team that is ready right now to win a Stanley Cup. But offense isn't the issue here in New York. It is goaltending and defense for sure. And lastly, you know who this is going to be. From the Edmonton Oilers, one of the best, probably the best player this season, Connor McDavid. He was unbelievable. This season just proved that one player doesn't make a team in the NHL. This is not basketball where having a player, a superstar, can automatically make your team a playoff team or a contending team just because of one guy. McDavid was unreal this year. It is not his fault at all that the Oilers stunk. It was their defense and goaltending and depth, and everything other than him was a huge problem for the Oilers. But McDavid was absolutely fantastic. He played all 82 games. He had 41 goals, 67 assists for 108 points, and 1.32 points per game. Led the league in points. Obviously led his team in points. Over 100 points again this season. Well over a point per game. He was just fantastic. You cannot ask for any more from a superstar player in the NHL. I feel really bad for him that the Oilers were as bad as they were, because with guys like this, they should not have been that far out of the playoffs. They need to put some people around him that can help him, because a disastrous season like Edmonton had this year is just unacceptable. Fix the defense, get Cam Talbot back to the goaltender he was last season, and the Oilers have got to be a playoff team every year with a guy like McDavid, and the team that they have. There is no reason for them not to be in the playoffs, and quite frankly, they should be contending for Stanley Cups. But those are my 10 guys that had very good years, even though they were on very bad teams. So thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Check out Off the Wall Hockey on social media and offthewallhockey.com. All those links are in the description below. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.